Let me ask you something. Have you ever wanted to own me? Well, now you can. Thanks to YouTubes. They made the cutest little Sphere Hunter plushie of all time. Look at her little shoes. They're so cute. You can only get this here plushie for 10 days. 10 days. You better get one, or else I'll beat you up. Look at her, she's so cute. Don't you want her? Give me money. The Sphere Hunter plush is only available for 10 days. So pre-order her while you can. She's soft to the touch and sits at an impressive 9 inches. That's right, you can enjoy 9 inches of the Sphere Hunter if you want. She's the one wearing the glasses now. Resident Evil 1 Remake is my favorite game of all time. It's a title that, in my opinion, perfected the survival horror genre. It's got heart-racing enemy encounters, atmosphere thicker than a bowl of oatmeal, and an overall visual audio presentation that has stood the test of time. For me, it's a perfect 10 out of 10, so you can imagine how pleased I was when it got re-released on modern platforms back in 2015. My favorite thing was back and extremely well received by the general audience. I bet you could imagine my shock when just a few months later, Capcom officially announced a remake of Resident Evil 2. The idea of RE2, possibly the most well-received game in its franchise, getting its own remake, was a dream for not just Resident Evil fans, but for people who love video games. RE1 Remake being locked to GameCube at its release in 2002 was a blessing and a curse. On one hand, the GameCube's superior power boosted what Capcom was able to produce with their second crack at RE1. The real horror of Remake was its poor financial performance. It's an undeniable fact that if Remake had gotten a multi-plat release, we probably would have also gotten remakes of RE2 and 3 in the early 2000s. Well, that's not what happened, and in 2019 we finally got a remake of Resident Evil 2. And believe it or not, it's actually been out for a full 5 years. Ever since this game's release, I've been looking forward to making this particular video. As we all know, when games come out, there's a level of unreal excitement that I can only compare to new car smell. I was really positive in my initial videos with almost everything RE2R gave me back then. So I'm really excited to re-examine this blockbuster title with a clearer, more focused mind. RE2R is currently the highest-selling Resident Evil title, so let's see if it still deserves its spot on the charts. Let's head back to the dark streets of Raccoon City in Resident Evil 2, 2019. RE2R extending Leon and Claire's iconic arrivals to Raccoon City with a playable Mizoil gas station visit was, and still kind of is, mind-blowing to me. As you can probably remember from the original RE2, this opening was a cutscene, but now it's a lovingly tense tutorial preparing you for the rest of the game. The gas station, surrounded by infinite darkness and some of the heaviest rain I've ever seen in a video game, perfectly sets the dark stage of this remake's reimagined story. That ever-present and familiar feeling of loneliness and isolation this series is well known for is enhanced with such incredible detail. The gas station is a giant mess, packed with tons of small environment detail that I just can't help but stare a little too long at. Distant moaning snapping us out of our trance leads us to a wounded employee.
You all right? Don't move. I'll be back for you.
Who locks the door behind us.
Hey, what are you doing?
Stop moving.
Officer, you need help?
Stay back, sir. I got this.
The reveal of the first zombie ripping this poor officer's neck apart is bone-chilling. It's equally as chilling seeing how much damage this rotted freak takes before going down. A quick indication at how strong each and every basic zombie is going to be. Some players may be left with a bullet or two after this one encounter, alluding to the fact that conserving your resources is still a main ingredient to this game's revived classic survival horror gameplay. Before leaving, the zombie we just pumped full of lead is getting back up. Running for the front door, we run into the other protagonist in a wonderful gameplay to cutscene transition.
Don't shoot! Get down!
It's fast, it's chaotic, it's absolutely Resident Evil 2.
Hello? Is anybody here?
Stepping through the doors of this reimagined RPD, This iconic location now fully realized in photorealistic detail, you're hit with one incredibly oppressive mood. Like its older sibling, RE1 Remake, RE2R's atmosphere is thick. This place is also a huge mess. It's darker than the pits of hell and quiet, painfully quiet. A very understated rendition of the original game's main hall theme can be heard under your footsteps, and all the creaking this ancient, almost undead place groans out. RE2R is set during a torrential downpour that never seems to stop. It's exactly my favorite horror vibe. The RPD this time around is so believably detailed, and after a quick run through the streets of Raccoon and getting through the precinct's front gate, I loved seeing Leon brush the built-up rainwater off his sleeves before opening the front door. Never you mind walking past all the wrapped-up bodies of the lost souls who desperately lost their lives to whatever this outbreak is. I love how the RPD staffers threw these body bags outside, indicating their knowledge of this dark, reanimated threat. With the gas station and opening, as you'll come to find, RE2R has a ton of awesome environmental storytelling. While I do love RE2R's dark, realistic, visual and audio aesthetic, I want to say the game might veer a little too far into the realm of modern realism with its musical presentation, that being, it barely exists. The understated RPD theme we hear in the beginning is the only time we ever hear it, and one of the only pieces of ambient recognizable music in the entire game. Aside from a few key story moments and cutscenes, RE2R doesn't really feature many ambient tracks, instead offering quiet musical cues whenever enemies make an appearance, which in a way diffuses and strips back the Resident Evil 2 of it all. If you remember, the original PS1 game had ambient music playing all over the place. None of it got old, and if anything, it created and pushed the identities of every single room in that original police station. If you're familiar with it and hear a piece of RE2 music disconnected from the game itself, chances are you'll know exactly which room said track belongs to. That being said, I still love the way the game looks. It's funny because every modern AAA game strives for a photorealistic look nowadays, but RE2R being one of the first truly photoreal games, I feel holds up incredibly well. Maybe it's the 2019 nostalgia talking, but I really think that the characters look phenomenal. The novelty of living with these classic PS1 versions of these iconic heroes, then seeing them fully realized like this was, and still does feel like a fever dream to me. Original RE4's rendition of a matured Leon is, and will always be, a definitive look for him. But this particular younger Leon has become my favorite look for the character in this era of his life. I think Claire's fit has aged a little less gracefully for me as time's passed, but I don't hate it. I wish her default remake costume was a little closer to her original Darkside Chronicles fit, but I think Capcom was really trying to nail the 90s college girl jeans aesthetic this time. And it's fine. What RE2R needed to nail, and happily does, is its true survival horror gameplay. When Capcom brought back traditional survival horror in RE7 Biohazard, I thought they did a great job at reintroducing things like limited resource conservation, basic enemies that were hard as nails, and reviving the long-dead save room with a typewriter equivalent. RE2R definitely feels like an evolution of what RE7 was presenting, but much more polished, and much more in line with the original game. So obviously, resource management and keeping your inventory tidy is a big focus of the gameplay loop. At first, I was a little conflicted with the amount of side pack inventory upgrades you can acquire. You can now pretty much carry all of your weapons at once by the mid-game, but when looking at this remake's changes as a whole, it makes sense needing the extra space for ammo with how much of it is required for like one zombie. Managing your stuff, creating a mental map of your surroundings, and keeping enemy placement in mind feels more important than ever. Smaller mechanical refinements are also present that add up and contribute to an overall immersive experience. Guns feel more like tools rather than toys now. This new approach to each firearm actually maintains that classic feel to each combat encounter. Pistols are your constant offensive tool, weak but can keep you going if you use them wisely. The shotgun and grenade launcher are basically one-hit kills or dismemberment tools if your aim is careful enough. And the special weapons like the flamethrower and spark shot are best used on special, larger enemies. There's a real fine balance to all of these weapons now, and using them in the right ways is what'll get you through the night. Recklessly blasting away at small fries with your big guns will still leave you ammo-less, like any classic Resident Evil. The best new addition to RE2 is another element borrowed from the title's older sibling, and that's the defensive knives and grenades. I absolutely love how this mechanic was brought over. The loose knives system is really cool, but also adds to that brutal feel to combat. Now the knives you find lying around are the knives you attack with. It was a bold move on Capcom's part, making each knife breakable and limited. Having these new limited use knives that act as your grab breakaways adds to the game's overall dark and oppressive tone. Now all of your offense options are limited and need to be carefully considered before using. I love how this game uses mechanics from all across the franchise, like Remake 1's breakaways, but also the ability to knife enemies on the fly while they're grounded like in classic RE4. But doing that willy-nilly will damage this precious breakaway item, recontextualizing that RE4 mechanic in a more survival horror way. I know a lot of people don't like weapon durability in games, but in a horror situation like this, I think it makes perfect sense to leave the player on edge at all times. Unlike RE7, the game actually pauses in the inventory screen, giving you a minute to think about your next move. The map system here is probably the best it's ever been, with your character marking down item, puzzle, and door locations, as well as if said door is locked, adding a level of realism that we never really got in a Resident Evil title, and more than not evokes Silent Hill's mechanical depth, funnily enough. Combat encounters are brutal. Like that first zombie we talked about, every other zombie is an absolute bullet sponge. On my first playthrough from that beginner's perspective, I was confused with how much ammo I was chewing through. Being used to most other RE titles, 5 to 7 pistol shots would always put down any zombie. But here I was expending entire mags, and sometimes that wouldn't even be enough to fully kill one zombie. That's when the unadvertised secret genius of RE2R came into play. I'm still impressed at how Capcom chose not to mention this game's deep zombie dismemberment system in any gameplay videos in the marketing phase. Attacking at a certain limb will disable that appendage's function, kneecap a zombie, and they drop to the ground, making them much easier to focus on and pick off. Remove one or both of a zombie's arms and grabs are no longer a threat. Remove all of a zombie's limbs and they're basically useless. With all of that said, and for how much I love this system, I do think it is a little ridiculous how pretty much any of the pistols still operate on a headshot pop percentage. Every other weapon besides Claire's Mach 11 can pretty consistently pop or do massive damage to a zombie's head. Claire's game is overall easier than Leon's in a lot of different ways, but her upgraded loadout sees her small pea shooter becoming a powerful magnum by the end. So not only does Claire get a high-speed SMG and a one-shot grenade launcher, you can permanently put the endgame zombies out of their misery for good with her magnum. Taking everything into account, I guess Leon suffers the most from this zombie bullet sponge issue, seeing as his main firearm, the Matilda, fares a lot worse compared to Claire's multiple pistol options. I still think it makes sense from a design perspective with how much more accurately you can down enemies now, but maybe a higher crit rate chance on zombie heads with Leon's pistol could have been something that could be upgraded with his variety of Matilda parts. Other than zombies, I still think all other creatures are perfectly well balanced and fun to play against. Again, Claire has an easier time with all of the other goons you cross paths with, but that doesn't mean they're not also as tough as the zombies. Zombie dogs attack in packs and can easily catch you off guard. The sewer G adults are extremely powerful, poisonous, and can spit out little buddies to sneak up on you. The iconic lickers are as fast as the Flash and can put you in danger in the blink of an eye. What's really cool about getting past all these guys is the game's other unadvertised gameplay mechanic, stealth. Now, don't get me wrong, you're not crouch walking past ghoulies like The Last of Us, but as long as something doesn't see or hear you, you can get past them unscathed. This is used to great effect against the eyeless lickers, but also for zombies and stupid perros. Even a few of the G adults can be sneaked past down an Oregon Trail. This is something that is communicated to you in the liquor files, but finding out on my own that I could do this against other monsters was like a holy revelation of an unnatural kind. Stealth especially works against one foe in particular.
Jesus Christ!
That, my friends, is Mr. X, or as he's known in Umbrella, the T-103 Tyrant. This dude is one hell of an obstacle to avoid. Thoroughly upgraded from his original 1998 counterpart, X is after you to an unrelenting degree. There are maybe 2 rooms he can't enter, but outside of that, he will follow you all over the RPD. Seeing this dude climb up and down ladders still blows my mind. I know a lot of people really hate this guy for how persistent he is, and I guess that's a them problem because I love the thrilling chases this guy always put me through. Again, with that RE7 jack tech in place, RE2R perfects that style of chase set piece. You can put this guy down, but he'll always be back up. And what I love is, unlike the original game's Mr. X, who was treated more like a rare Pokemon sighting than a scary predator, taking him down in classic RE2 always netted you a loot drop, usually big amounts of ammo. But in Remake, he drops you wasted time and ammo. I love Remake Mr. X, but I kinda hate how Capcom used him as the modern Resident Evil pursuer instead of Nemesis in RE3R. But I've complained about that game more than enough for one lifetime. One thing Mr. X kind of forces you to get a feel for is the layout of wherever he's stalking you, and that leads me to RE2R's phenomenal level design. The environments of RE2R look amazing and are supported by the game's overall dark and rainy mood. Just like its original counterpart using pre-rendered backgrounds to shift artistic and mechanical focus, 2R uses its darkness and cramped over-the-shoulder camera to catch you off guard with monster attacks, subtle environmental noises, and total misdirects. I love how much respect is paid to the original RE2 in this remake's level design, perfectly recreating a lot of the old game's areas and flawlessly adding new rooms and hallways where they'd best fit to create intrigue and confusion in the player. The new third-floor staircase that leads to the library being the biggest "what the" moment in particular. The game almost feels like it's lulling you into a false sense of security, delivering on the familiar while slowly amping up the new. The original run to the precinct being shorter and OG liquor reveal not being there had me questioning everything. What's badass about the iconic liquor hallway this time is, while the creature isn't physically here, the remnants of its activity sure are. Broken and boarded up windows, the bloody slashed face and hanging corpses, and massive claw marks embedded in one of the walls lets you know that something a little more advanced than a zombie has been through here, and that you should be scared of it. It's actually genius how much they tease out the first liquor with this hallway, files, and finally a new window jump scare reminiscent of the original game. After that, you're on edge, solving puzzles, jumping at shadows, fighting zombies, and bam! You finally run into it outside of the STARS office of all places. I love how, as both characters, you get a bit more Raccoon City at the end of your first RPD visit. Leon following after the mysterious Ada, and Claire getting chased out by X. I remember being concerned about the lack of Raccoon City at the start of my first playthrough back in the day, but was relieved to see they just moved it. We also get to hang out with my favorite Resident Evil zombie on Claire's side of things, Misty, and I never kill her, ever. I love you, Misty. You've enchanted my heart since 1998. I love your booty shorts. You're so fucking cute. Whenever I choose to replay this game, I usually do Leon's path, because I like his bonus character scenario a lot. Ada's run through the sewers over the heavily scripted Sherry set piece in Claire's game. Sherry's set piece is really great on first playthrough. However, it's kind of gotten to a point where if you stream this part of the game, the Twitch chat will be saying every single one of Chief Iron's lines of dialogue as they play out in real time. It's really cool to see a very human threat that wants to trap you instead of kill you in a Resident Evil game, but I wish the sneaking was a bit more free and less linear. You literally have to do the same exact thing every single time you play this section of the game, making Claire replays a little less enticing for me. The remake sewers and lab are so cool now. One of my least favorite things, level design-wise, from original RE2 was that we never got to spend a whole lot of time in these locations before we split. The updated sewers are a fully interconnected level now, with multiple floors, puzzles, unique enemies, and each give you your character's final weapon, which is of course the coolest weapon they get. It's wild getting to play around in this place for potentially an hour's worth of game time, and then moving a hidden bookshelf and just stepping right back into the RPD, realizing that no, everything you've played up to this point is one map with no loading screens. The strongest part of Resident Evil's basic level design at its core is its interconnected nature and folding level design. I'm so happy to see that this game just has that kind of stuff all throughout its runtime. I also love the incredible lack of hand-holding here too. The game gives you great tools like the map and expects you to use it as freely as you want to find your way around. There is an objective listed in your inventory, but these only activate once your character stumbles into a story event or uncovers a specific key item or event through gameplay. The lab being the final set piece of this title kinda took my breath away. In the original game, Birkin's lab was an old, forgotten industrial place, caked in rust and rot. Now it's an Illuminati-tier, high-tech hideout for unspeakable human depravity. The slick, clean look of this place greets you right after the grossest and dirtiest chapter of the story. Peeling this place's layers back reveals its pockets of death and disarray. The core's connecting bridge lead into an infinite abyss that seems to burrow into the center of the earth itself. Massive pillars litter the dark horizon as far as the eye can see. It's a place that shouldn't make any sense. Yet here it is. It's something that's freaked me out since I played the game 5 years ago. I love this new take on Birkin's Lab, or Umbrella's Nest. The RE games have tried adapting things from the RE movies for a while now, and I feel like this location would slot perfectly into one of those movies, but it's not super over the top in its presentation, so it feels more believable in the context of Resident Evil 2. The lab-specific enemy type is obviously the IVs, or plant zombies, and let me say right now, the remake version of these guys outscare the 98 version any day of the week. These creatures are one-hit kill enemies, and while they may go down easily to fire, you go down for good if they grab you. One of my favorite things about the new lab is both characters get absolute banger escape themes. Claire's especially goes shockingly hard. I'm crying in the club. Leon's is this overblown rendition and almost continuation of Mr. X's chase theme as it arcs, dips, and crescendos perfectly during his final chase and final battle, where we blast his ass to smithereens with my favorite quad-barrel rocket launcher. Like, why did they not put music in this game? When it shows up, it's fantastic. Why is there not more music in this game? Now that we've covered the gameplay, here's where we get to some disappointment on my recent revisit to this reimagined Midwestern hellscape. In retrospect, after completing the game again, I wasn't too fond of the story RE2R's telling, sadly. For as good as the gameplay is and continues to be, I really felt the absence of proper scenarios this time around, having also replayed the original RE2. In the original game, if you finish the story as one character, you get to play an alternate scenario of what the other character did during your first playthrough. You get two halves of a story. 2R has a sort of scenario system, but the only differences here are the alternate starts and endings. You don't get the intro with Marvin on Scenario 2, which feels like the game is going to keep throwing things like this at you, but it doesn't. You play the exact same events that you just played as the other character, minus their own side characters' quests. So you fight the same bosses again as if a magical janitorial staff cleaned everything up and the set dressers came out to reset the scenes. It's genuinely kinda stupid. One other thing that made me think there'd be more to the second scenario was the restored original liquor jump scare. I was like, oh, maybe the second scenario will be more accurate to the original game, but no, that in particular is just an Easter egg. Now that I think about it, the second scenario honestly feels like a replay / speedrunner mode. It's overall shorter than the first run, and you start with a pistol chambered in .45 caliber. It's fun just blasting through RE2R again, but it makes the overall experience of the game feel emptier in a lot of ways. It's especially weird when you finish the second run and get the real final boss and true ending. But man, is it obvious to see what Capcom's biggest inspiration was for this remake. RE2R, narratively speaking, takes more from RE1 Remake than it does the game it's remaking. It's cheaper to make a game with two playable characters running the same gauntlet of story and bosses, but it isn't what RE2 was doing back in 1998. I get that it's difficult getting actors back in to do more performance capture for double the scenes, but that's what fans are going to expect from a remake of RE2. Speaking of performances, there are a few strange ones in this game, mostly originating from characters like Annette, Ben, and Chief Irons. On the surface, Annette Birkin being so lost in her work and outright ignoring Claire when she's right in front of her makes sense for a self-absorbed mad scientist, but her scenes with Claire are weirdly structured and directed.
I didn't foresee this. Excuse me. Where is she? Hello?
What?
Where's she?
Annette. Tell me, what happened to William?
I don't know. Who's that?
The creature responsible for this.
What? Can you help me find Sherry?
Seems to be evolving much faster than expected.
Where are you going?
Look, I don't have time to play 20 questions. Everything's under control.
I need to find Sherry.
My daughter is not your concern.
I just don't like it. Ben Bertolucci dies in his first scene, which sucks because this was a recurring character in the original game who had better paced dialogue and direction for Leon's story. Here, he's like a speed bump for the fans to go, oh look, it's Ben. They put him in the game. He feels like a checklist item that was on the cutting room floor but managed to make it in with this shorter scene. Chief Irons is completely insane in 2R, to like an annoying degree. He's so stereotypically evil and fat and red-faced, and he somehow feels more like a cartoon than the original game, which, by the way, original Irons compared to this guy was genuinely off-putting. Everything new Irons does is believably evil, like a one-note kind of evil. Oh, he bullies kids? Wow, I hate him. Good job, Capcom. In the original game, he tries to come off as normal to Claire, despite having a corpse on his desk. Just sitting there, open for all to see. Like, obviously this guy isn't right in the head, but he's acting like everything's okay, which is way more interesting and scary than just a guy that kidnaps children for the hero to save. Out of each supporting character, Marvin is the best side character, but is also barely in this game due to how his story plays out. He's probably my favorite character upgrade and is so beautifully performed by Christopher Watson. I wish there was an alternate story mode where we could get to the RPD earlier and save him, but alas, my Outbreak fanfiction will never be real. Seriously though, it is so cool how, depending on who you're playing as, Marvin acts differently. With Leon, he's a stern father figure. With Claire, he treats her like a civilian, but also as the sibling to one of the most highly trained and capable officers in the city. He himself even acknowledges that. There are different levels of respect offered to both players, and I felt with Leon he wasn't mincing words. He gives Leon the truth of the situation right away, as he would with any of his men. But with Claire, she happens to pull the horror of the outbreak out of him in a more agonizing and slower way, as he comes to grips with the situation. By Marvin's end, you can tell this guy was desperate to keep whatever survivors he could safe, but sadly, he'll never know how much he did that kept our heroes alive. These differences make the lack of a proper second scenario stand out even more to me. I can only imagine how different Capcom could have made the rest of the game if they had put a little extra effort into giving us more stuff like this in particular on that second story. Besides a boatload of cursing,
I'll get you, you fucker!
I think Claire and Leon are still great. Sure, there are a few awkward takes here and there, but I don't think that's a reflection of any actor's skill in this game. I think RE2R suffers slightly from some really odd scene direction. Like, one of my all-time favorite scenes in the series, the Kendo gun shop scene, is just expertly performed on all sides. The late, great Ken Lally delivers a fiery, emotionally charged version of Robert Kendo, desperately trying to keep it together for his dying child. Leon and Ada purely being a disruption, not able to give him any clarity or closure on his daughter's condition, drives him to taking his own life. This sets Leon off on his real quest to save people, like the cop he trained to be. It's so dark and contemplative. And then Capcom decided Leon should say this line in this way.
They have a virus. It turns people into indestructible monsters.
That explains the horrible things I've seen.
Obviously, one of the scene editors didn't know where this line would take place, because how the fuck do you explain that? I cannot stand how Birkin's origin mutation cutscene from the original game is now split between 4 separate disjointed cutscenes consisting of 2 flashbacks and 2 POV videotapes. It's like, why couldn't we just include all of this in one flashback like the original? 2 of those puzzle pieces are optional, by the way. Nothing was lost from the original flashback just being a flashback explained by Annette Birkin.
She is my creation!
Hey, it's Frank West. Could you imagine if he was in his own remake?
Yeah, well, I'm freelance, pal. I don't make my living waiting for the TV to tell me what to cover.
That being said, I do completely love Leon and Ada's scenes together. Both characters have great chemistry together in this story, and the iconic goodbye fake-out death scene, I feel, is a nice combination and compromise to the 2 original Ada endings of RE2 Classic. Jolene Anderson and Nick Apostolidis go off in their final scene together.
Hand over the sample, Leon. I don't want to hurt you.
And you shoot me. but I don't think you can.
And then Annette shoots Ada through Leon, shattering my concept of reality and suspension of disbelief completely. But then it ends so perfectly.
Hold on. I think I can.
Forget it.
Shut up, I've got you.
It's not worth it.
Don't do this.
Take care of yourself, Leon.
No!
That's what really bugs me. Like, replaying the game now and seeing all of this with fresh eyes really boggles the mind. The structure of a lot of the scenes, even the best ones, can get a little weird. And to me, it feels like maybe too many cooks were in the kitchen when writing and planning out these very important cutscenes. I made a feature-length RE4 Remake story analysis video that explores Leon's growth as a character from this game to that one. I just wanted to praise the acting here one more time. I love how through the performance capture, when Ada falls and Leon recovers, when he turns to face the escape elevator, you can clearly see his darker RE4 Remake self rise to the surface. Being in the know, I've heard through the grapevine that Capcom really wanted Leon to feel like a small fry rookie in this game particularly, to really emphasize his metamorphosis into a cold, calculated badass in 4 Remake. And I think they were completely successful in doing that. It really shows in the consistency of the performance in both games. Claire's moments with Sherry are pretty cool too. For full clarity, I'll say I do prefer Claire's entire original story, but what's here is fun. I like how you can actually read a letter from Chris and Claire has a reaction to it. That's her entire goal of coming to Raccoon City, so it's nice to see it acknowledged further. Claire's intro with Sherry is interesting to say the least. For starters, Claire and Sherry don't even ask each other's names until Chief Irons asks Claire what her name is during his psychotic episode.
What's your name? What's your fucking name?
Claire!
Sherry, you come with me now, or say goodbye to Claire.
Again, it's genuinely weird writing and pacing. I think Stephanie Panisello is doing a great job playing Claire, like just in general, but in this game, Claire's writing and direction is a little standoffish. Like not even towards the villains, but even to like Sherry. I just don't think it's very Claire of her to not want to ask this girl her name, or even in just some of the line deliveries, she sounds mad at this poor kid she's supposed to protect.
So, where's your dad?
He, worked with my mom, but he's gone.
Wow. Both of my parents are gone, and it's just me and my brother.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Don't be. It means we've got something in common, and that's a good thing, right?
I get that she's on edge, she literally just fought a giant monster, but it comes off very, sorry little girl, whoever you are, I'm older than you, so my trauma is more important. The standoffish nature of these line deliveries feels not like they're bonding over this experience, but it just feels like Claire is interjecting her own story over Sherry's. And it's like, you guys just met. What's her name? I've heard Stephanie's other Claire performances, and in those particular CGI movies, she comes off nicer and feels a bit more classic in her line deliveries. These issues really come down to the direction. For all its faults, RE2R's direct story comparison, RE3R, is clearly better directed and structured. And I think RE4 and Village are also fantastic in these departments. Good job, Steve. Claire's famous "because I care" speech is still extremely heartwarming. And the final few scenes between her, Sherry, and Annette are great. I love how Claire just goes into action hero mode, offering to carry Annette's damaged body out of the lab. Claire gets really cool moments in boss fights, especially against Final Birkin, and those moments stand out the most to me when I think about this version of the character. She's super confident, capable, and cool, and I love that. Listen, I can pick apart scenes all day, but what I want to say to wrap up this part of the video is that I think this rendition of RE2's story is lacking quite a bit of the charm of the original game's 90s magic. Outside of the intros and outros, we don't get many interactions with our leads like we once did. Leon and Claire's stories feel so separate now. It seems like at a certain point, a lot of the scenes we did get got shuffled around or something because so much of the core of the original RE2's narrative feels absent here. In its attempt to just smush scenes from scenarios A and B together, we end up with a lot of weird writing, disjointed scenes, and strange pacing. It's not the worst told video game story, but when I play the game nowadays, it's for its nail-biting gameplay, and not whatever this is.
Words won't work on this thing.
Of course they won't, Leon. It's a fucking monster. It's a giant fucking monster. Of course words won't work, you idiot. In conclusion, RE2R is still basically a 9 out of 10 for me. The gameplay and atmosphere carries a somewhat janky retelling of RE2's events. While I do love it to death, I will say RE2R's biggest offense to society is that it popularized remake culture. I think this game is fantastic, but it did pave the way for pretty much any studio to not think outside of the box anymore. Like, what's guaranteed to make money in this overinflated, budgeted game development landscape? A new idea or a remake of an old great idea? RE2R started the modern remake avalanche we've been getting for the past few years. Remakes, remasters, deluxe remasters. I don't know. I'm getting really tired of it. While I was replaying RE2R for this video, I kept having this thought repeat in my mind. What if all of these polished, existing, and brand new systems were just used for a new Resident Evil title? A new Resident Evil story? What if this game was like Revelations 3, where you played as new characters in this dark, rainy vibe, with a brand new pursuer monster chasing you all over a cool house or something, or even like a small town? If you've watched my previous videos at all, you know I love older games. I love the PS1 and 2 generations with all of my heart, and love when those games get preserved on our modern machines. I also genuinely adore the recent RE Engine titles, but man, do I hope we get to see some Resident Evil side games again. We're long overdue for another ambitious spin-off with a lot of heart and creativity pumped into it. If Capcom's listening, I want you guys to know that there are still fans out here wanting fresh, original ideas again. We want risky titles that'll stand out from the pack and inspire, like RE2 did to a generation of gamers back in the 90s. Well, I guess we'll just have to wait for something like that to happen, like everything else in life. For now, yes, RE2R is still fantastic. Hey everyone, if you like this video, please consider subscribing and checking out my Patreon link in the description. Big thanks to you twos for the awesome plushie. It's like the cutest version of me that's ever existed. This past year has been pretty rough, so with that in mind, I've been working on a lot of stuff for this here channel, but also got some cool Patreon and merch plans cooking. Any and all support would make a massive difference right now, whether that be through Patreon or buying some merch, but yes, please consider doing so. I think that's all for me today, so without further ado, I take my leave. I'll talk to you all very soon. Later.